Picture this: marble columns gleaming in the afternoon sun, steam rising from pristine pools, Romans in flowing togas discussing philosophy while servants attend to their every need. This is how we've been taught to imagine Roman bathhouses, symbols of an advanced civilization that prioritized cleanliness and social harmony. Hollywood has painted these spaces as elegant spas where cultured citizens gathered to cleanse both body and mind. But what if everything we think we know about Roman baths is fundamentally wrong? What if these seemingly sophisticated institutions were actually festering pools of disease, places where the wealthy and poor alike shared not just water, but parasites, infections, and bodily waste? The reality of Roman bathhouses wasn't the sanitized version we see in movies. It was a nightmare that would make even the most hardened modern germaphobe recoil in horror. The Romans built over 900 public bathhouses across their empire, each one capable of serving thousands of people daily. They saw these facilities as the pinnacle of their cultural achievement, proof of their superiority over the barbarian tribes who didn't understand the importance of public hygiene. Yet in their pursuit of cleanliness, they created something far more sinister, massive breeding grounds for the very diseases they sought to wash away. The tragic irony is that their ignorance of basic sanitation principles transformed these monuments to civilization into death traps that claimed countless lives. Today, we're going to take you inside the real Roman bathhouse experience, not the romanticized version, but the brutal, unsanitary reality that millions of Romans endured daily. Prepare yourself for a journey that will forever change how you view one of history's most misunderstood institutions. To understand just how appalling Roman bathhouses truly were, we need to examine the society that created them. By the height of the Roman Empire, public bathing had become more than just a hygienic practice. It was a social requirement, a daily ritual that defined Roman identity. Citizens weren't just encouraged to visit the baths, they were expected to do so. Skipping your daily bath was seen as uncivilized, barbaric behavior that marked you as an outsider. The typical Roman bathhouse, or Thermae, was an architectural marvel spanning several acres. These massive complexes contained multiple pools of varying temperatures: the caldarium, hot bath, tepidarium, warm bath, and frigidarium, cold bath. Wealthy Romans would spend hours moving between these pools, socializing, conducting business, and indulging in various treatments. The largest bathhouses, like the Baths of Caracalla in Rome, could accommodate over 1,600 bathers simultaneously. But here's where the problems began. Roman engineers, for all their architectural genius, had no understanding of germ theory, a concept that wouldn't be developed for another 1,500 years. They believed that illness was caused by bad air or imbalances in bodily humors, not by microscopic organisms thriving in warm, stagnant water. This fundamental misunderstanding of disease transmission meant that every design decision they made, every operational procedure they established, was based on completely false assumptions about health and safety. The Roman approach to water management reveals just how catastrophically wrong their thinking was. While they were masters of engineering who could transport fresh water across hundreds of miles through aqueducts, they saw no need to regularly change the water in their bathhouses. Why would they? The water looked clean, and they believed that the heat from the furnaces below would purify it. In reality, those same furnaces created the perfect temperature for bacterial growth, transforming each pool into a giant petri dish. The social dynamics within these bathhouses created additional layers of contamination. Roman society was rigidly hierarchical, and the baths reflected these divisions. However, while the wealthy might have had separate entrances or designated hours, they ultimately shared the same water as everyone else. Slaves, laborers, merchants, and aristocrats all soaked in the same pools, unknowingly sharing their diseases, parasites, and bodily fluids in a democratic exchange of pathogens that transcended social class. Step through the bronze doors of the Baths of Caracalla on a typical afternoon in 200 AD, and your senses would be immediately assaulted by a symphony of human activity and biological reality. The air hung thick with steam and the acrid smell of burning wood from the underground furnaces, but beneath that lay something else, the unmistakable odor of unwashed human bodies, stagnant water, and worse. The sound was overwhelming, hundreds of voices echoing off marble walls, the splash of bodies entering water, the scraping of bronze strigils against skin, and the constant background noise of coughing, retching, and other bodily functions that no amount of architectural grandeur could mask. The first stop for most Romans was the opediterium, the changing room, where personal belongings were stored in wall niches, watched over by slave attendants. From there, bathers typically began in the tepidarium, the warm room designed to help their bodies adjust to higher temperatures. The pool water, maintained at a comfortable temperature, had not been changed in weeks, sometimes months. Roman bath operators saw no reason to waste perfectly good water when it still looked relatively clear. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii and other sites reveals the horrifying reality of what Romans were actually bathing in. Microscopic analysis of drain samples shows the presence of intestinal parasites, including roundworm, whipworm, and fish tapeworm eggs. These parasites, which should have been killed by proper sanitation, not only survived but flourished in the bathhouse environment. The wealthy Romans had their own particular contribution to the bathhouse's toxicity. Accustomed to elaborate banquets where gluttony was not just accepted but celebrated, many would deliberately induce vomiting to make room for more food. This practice, called vomitorium, often took place right in the bathhouse pools. Contemporary accounts describe Romans sticking peacock feathers down their throats to trigger regurgitation, then immediately returning to the water. But perhaps the most shocking aspect of Roman bathhouse culture was the communal approach to personal hygiene in the latrines. Instead of individual toilet paper, a concept unknown to them, they used the Xylospongium, a natural sea sponge attached to a wooden stick. This tool was shared among all users, rinsed only in a bucket of salt water between uses. The social pressure to participate in this communal hygiene ritual was immense. Roman literature is filled with references to the importance of daily bathing, and citizens who avoided the baths were mocked as uncivilized barbarians. Martial, the famous Roman poet, wrote extensively about bath culture, describing it as essential to Roman identity. What he and his contemporaries didn't realize was that their cherished daily ritual was systematically weakening their immune systems. The water circulation systems, while ingenious from an engineering perspective, compounded the contamination problems. The Romans designed elaborate networks of pipes and channels to move water through the various pools, but these same systems allowed pathogens to spread throughout the entire complex. A single infected bather entering the caldarium could, within hours, contaminate every pool in the facility. The oils and perfumes that Romans applied to their skin before bathing created an additional layer of contamination. Bathers would coat themselves in oil, then use a curved metal tool called a strigil to scrape away the oil along with dirt and dead skin. This mixture of oil, dirt, sweat, and skin cells would then be rinsed off in the communal pools, creating a floating layer of organic matter that provided perfect nutrition for bacterial growth. Medical texts from the period, such as those by Galen, reveal that Roman physicians were baffled by the prevalence of skin diseases, digestive ailments, and respiratory infections among regular bathgoers. They prescribed more bathing as the cure, not realizing that the baths themselves were the source of the problem. The full horror of Roman bathhouse culture becomes clear when we examine the health consequences. that Romans themselves documented. Ancient Roman medical texts describe epidemic outbreaks of skin diseases, eye infections, and digestive ailments that swept through urban populations with terrifying regularity. What they didn't realize was that these outbreaks often originated in and were spread through their beloved bathhouses. Archaeological evidence from across the Roman Empire paints a devastating picture of public health. Analysis of sewage systems and burial sites reveals that Romans suffered from intestinal parasites at rates far higher than neighboring cultures who didn't practice communal bathing. Ironically, the Germanic tribes that Romans dismissed as filthy barbarians had significantly lower rates of parasitic infections and waterborne diseases. The economic impact of bathhouse-related illnesses was staggering. Roman military records describe entire legions weakened by dysentery and skin infections contracted during their visits to military bath facilities. Trade suffered as merchants fell ill after conducting business in bathhouse complexes. The very institutions that Romans believed showcased their cultural superiority were systematically undermining their economic and military power. Perhaps most tragically, the Romans came tantalizingly close to understanding the problem on multiple occasions. Some physicians noted that certain skin conditions seemed to spread from person to person in the baths. But their fundamental misunderstanding of disease transmission, their belief that illness came from bad air rather than contaminated water, prevented them from making the crucial connection. The philosophical implications run even deeper. Roman culture prided itself on rationality, order, and the conquest of nature through human ingenuity. Yet in their bathhouses, they created chaos, biological environments so hostile to human health that they would have appalled even medieval societies. Their confidence in their own superiority blinded them to the reality that their greatest cultural achievements were also their greatest public health disasters. The story of Roman bathhouses serves as a profound reminder of how cultural blind spots can transform our greatest achievements into our most dangerous mistakes. The Romans possessed remarkable engineering skills, sophisticated architecture, and complex social systems. Yet their ignorance of basic sanitation principles turned their crown jewels of public works into instruments of mass infection. This historical lesson resonates powerfully in our modern world, where we face our own challenges with public health, environmental contamination, and the unintended consequences of technological progress. Like the Romans, we often assume that our cultural practices are inherently beneficial simply because they're widely accepted or technologically impressive. Perhaps most haunting is the realization that millions of Romans died from diseases they could have easily prevented with knowledge that wouldn't be discovered for another millennium and a half. They went to their graves believing they were practicing superior hygiene while unknowingly poisoning themselves and their communities. The next time we celebrate the achievements of ancient civilizations, we would do well to remember the Roman baths, monuments to human ambition that became graveyards for human ignorance. In our rush to admire the past, we must never forget that progress isn't just about building bigger and more impressive structures. True advancement requires the wisdom to understand not just how to create, but how to create safely